In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up multiple displays when using X-Plane 12. Whether you have multiple pieces of avionics, multiple monitors, or both, you should have no problem setting things up after this video. So, just like a perfect landing starts with a perfect pattern, we need to set up the monitors correctly with Windows before we load into X-Plane. So to easily get to your display settings, you're going to go to your desktop and you're going to right-click anywhere. You'll then see this menu, and then you're just going to hover down and click on where it says Display Settings. And then that will bring up this menu. Okay, and then here's where you should see all of the monitors that you have plugged in. And so you are gonna wanna make sure of a few things here. The first is to make sure that there are the same number of monitors shown in this section as you have on your desk. And so one could be, let's say, your main monitor or 3 TVs, and then you might have a couple of pieces of avionics from us, and everything with a screen will also be a monitor in this little box right here. And so just make sure that they are all being recognized by the computer, and if not, just check the connections. Okay, and next then we want to make sure that we have the proper main monitor selected. And so this main monitor is going to be the monitor that the main menu for the simulator is going to be on. It's also where it's going to show if the sim is paused and where all of your desktop icons will be. And so you want to make sure it's convenient. For those of you that have a separate instructor station, then you're going to want that to be your main monitor. But then how do we know which monitor is which? Well, that's where this identify button comes into play. And so if you click on that, you're gonna see a number populate on your monitor. It goes away after a few seconds, so you might have to keep clicking it. But you're gonna see a number that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever. And then that is gonna tell you which is 1, which is 2 in this little window right here. And so in my case, the second monitor right here, let's say I want this to be my main monitor. I would just wanna make sure that this little box right here that says make this my main display is selected. If not, I would go to the monitor that I want to be my main display, and then I would click that checkbox. Okay, next we need to reorder the monitors, and this can vary widely depending on what system that you have from us or what hardware that you have. Now, we provide a guide for all of our cockpits, and in that guide it has the recommended settings for your specific configuration, whether it's a single 49-inch or 3 TVs or a single TV. So just make sure if you have one of our cockpits that you refer to this guide that comes with your simulator for the exact monitor placement in your display settings. That being said, if you don't have one of our cockpits, I can still give you a few guidelines to follow. And so if we take one of our full turnkey systems as an example, we recommend placing the simulator monitors. Let's say if you have 3 TVs, those would be the simulator monitors. We recommend taking those 3 monitors and placing them as far left as they can go. And then if you have a separate instructor station, like on a stand or something like that, then we recommend placing that immediately to the right of your main monitor or monitors. And then you can place your other avionics and stuff to the right of that. But that way, let's say you have 3 TVs and an instructor station, you're able to then drag your mouse from, let's say, the left TV to the middle TV to the right TV to the instructor station. And it all seems very fluid and pretty easy to navigate. And then after the instructor station, it goes on to avionics. And so that's just typically how we recommend setting it up. As for your avionics after the main monitors, I would go PFD and then MFD, right? Making sure that the PFD is to the left of the MFD, and then your other screens like GTCs, GPSs, backup gauges, etc. after that. But basically you just want it to make sense when going right to left, because you don't want your mouse to get lost to be going from this screen and then this screen and then this screen, right? It would get pretty confusing. All right, and additionally, you want to make sure that all of your monitors are what we call top justified. So they're all lined up and flush at the top. This just helps avoid some bugs or weird things that could come up later. Okay, now that you have them oriented in the correct way, you also want to make sure that the resolution and the frame rate of the monitor is set to the proper settings. Okay, and so start by clicking on any monitor and then scroll down until you see scale and layout. And so starting with scale, this refers to sort of the magnification of the monitor. And now Windows will occasionally set this to 150% for high resolution monitors, like this is a 4K monitor. And so for our systems, we recommend setting this to 100%. And so all you have to do to change that is click on the drop down, go up to 100% and click that. Now I'm gonna leave it at 150% for this tutorial because it does make things bigger so you can see it easier. All right, and below scale, you'll see display resolution. And so you're gonna wanna make sure this is set to the recommended settings. And if it is, you'll see recommended in parentheses. If you don't see recommended in parentheses, go ahead and click the drop down, and you'll potentially have to scroll up, maybe use your middle mouse wheel to find where it says recommended and make sure that one is selected. Now, the only exception to this is if you have 3 4K TVs. Then it's best to set the resolution to 2560 by 1440, or what's called 2K resolution. That's because 4K resolution can overstress the system. Oh, and in some circumstances, you may find that the screen of a component or some piece of avionics is upside down or inverted. And so for that, you can change the display orientation to a flipped version. And so underneath display resolution, you'll see display orientation. And so let's say that you have it in landscape and it looks right, but it's just upside down. Well, then you can just click on landscape flipped to change that. Okay, and that takes care of scale and layout, but then you're also going to want to make sure that we're getting the most frame rate out of the monitor. And so for that, let's click on advanced display, which is just below display orientation. And then if we open that up, we're then going to see this row right here that says choose a refresh rate. This 60 Hertz thing basically means the amount of frames per second that the monitor is capable of producing. And so you're going to want to click this drop down and set it to the highest setting. Now, if by chance you know that your monitor gets, say, 120 Hertz, but you only see maybe 60 Hertz here, it's probably your cable, and you should try using the manufacturer's cable or a really high quality DisplayPort cable to get the highest frames. Most larger 4K TVs only go to 60 Hertz anyway, which is more than fine for a simulator. And so if it is 60 Hertz, then I wouldn't worry about it. All right, you'll then repeat that same process for every monitor. And so you'll click on a monitor and then you'll scroll down and make sure it's at 100% scale, the recommended display resolution. You're gonna make sure that the screen isn't flipped. And then in advanced display, you're gonna set it to the highest Hertz that you can possibly get. All right, and now we finally get to load into X-Plane and tell it what we want to show on which screen. And so now go ahead and launch X-Plane. Okay, now that we're here, we need to get to the settings, and you can either do this from the main menu or after you've already loaded into a new flight. Now, we recommend doing this here, but I'll also show you how to access the display settings during a flight to fine-tune things while you're in the moment. So click on settings here on the far right. That'll bring you to this menu with all these different tabs. And so maybe it defaults you into the general tab here, but you need to go to the third one, which is titled graphics. Now at the top here are your graphics settings, and then beneath that is where you can set up the different monitors. Now we set this top part up for you if you have one of our simulators. These are just default settings. I haven't changed any of this. This is a fresh X-Plane download, and so I wouldn't copy this. But if you have maybe older PC, then you don't want to be at maximum texture resolution. You're going to want to put that to something lower and then maybe see how many frames you get after that. So a little bit of just kind of trial and error here to see how smooth your system runs once you get that going. But what we're focused on is down here where it says monitor configuration. And so how I'm doing that is I'm just scrolling down with my middle mouse wheel. And if for some reason that's not working for you, you can come over to the right side where you see this scroll bar right here, and you're going to want to take it as far to the bottom as it goes. Now, if you have multiple monitors, you probably only see a couple here. And so in order to get to those ones that are further to the right, you're going to need to take the scroll wheel and make sure it is all the way at the bottom. Once it's at the bottom, you'll see a horizontal scroll wheel that allows you to then drag that to the right to see your other monitors. All right, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, I know, but that's how it is. All right, but this monitor configuration area is how we tell X-Plane what we want to show on each monitor. Let's say you have multiple avionics, full screen simulator, instructor station. This is where we let X-Plane know what we want where. So it says here on every monitor, click to edit. And so go ahead and click any monitor for now, and then you'll see a drop down where you can change the monitor's function. And so right now I have this top one set to full screen simulator. And if I click that drop down, I'll see windowed simulator. So it has the white bar up top and I could drag it around and move it around if I wanted to. Instructor operating station or 2D panel. And so let's say that you had 3 TVs that you're setting up as left, center, and right. You would want each of those to be a full screen simulator. So you just go to each one, click the drop down, and change all those to full screen sim. And then if you had, let's say, a 4th screen set up as an instructor station where you want to move the aircraft around, change the weather quickly, time, those kinds of things, then you would want to click in the drop down and select the instructor operating station. Now, most avionics from us, you're gonna wanna set to 2D panel only, but there are some exceptions for that. So just make sure that you read the guide that comes with your simulator. Now, if you select a monitor to be a full screen simulator, then you'll also see these additional options. And so starting at the top, you'll see this visual settings with a plus sign. If you click on that, it will then populate this dropdown. Now, we recommend leaving this as is, where it says forward with a 3D cockpit, but if you wanted to change it to not have a cockpit outside and you couldn't see the wings or anything like that, you just wanted it to be all scenery, then you could go with that. So some people prefer that. And so collapsing that just takes away that part. And now all we see is the lateral field of view. Now, if you have one of our larger full turnkey systems, then we set all of this up for you at the factory. And so if you have that, then great, you don't have to sweat this part. Otherwise, the settings can vary between systems. And so consult the documentation that came with your sim for exact details. Now, all that being said, I'll still give you a rundown of how we normally set up the majority of our sims. But again, this can completely vary. And so our recommended setting is 85 degrees for the lateral field of view. And then below that, you'll then see the visual offsets. And so if you click and expand that, then let's say you have a left and a right monitor, you're gonna wanna set those to 85 degrees, minus 85 if it's the left, and a positive 85 degrees if it's the right. So basically we wanna match up the lateral rotation offset with the lateral field of view. So hopefully that makes sense. And so the center monitor will have it set to 0 because that's just straight ahead. The left monitor would be minus 85 in this instance, and the right monitor would be positive 85 for the lateral rotation offset. But again, like I said, that can completely vary. All right, but that wraps up how to set up your displays in X-Plane 12. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, I'll personally respond to you in the comments below, and happy flying. Peace.